I'm pregnant and my boyfriend just broke up with me. My parents are threatening to kick me out of the house, but my aunt helped save my life. Hi. You can call me Amy. I'm 18 and in the toughest situation of my life. I just graduated high school and have no idea what I want to do with my life, which I know doesn't make me special. But that's not what makes my situation unique. The thing is, I'm in love with this guy Mark. Well, was in love. I don't know if I still am or not. I definitely don't think he's in love with me. And the other thing is, I'm pregnant. Now considering my age, that would be a bad enough situation if we were in love and committed to spending the rest of our lives together. But we basically just had a relationship-ending fight outside of a McDonald's at 10 p.m., which was just as trashy as it sounds. We'd been hanging out with friends all night, and I just hadn't been myself since he picked me up at my parents'. I still live with them while commuting to the local state college. Anyway, he finally noticed and called me out on it and I couldn't lie. I have a notoriously bad poker face. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd be okay with it. I don't know, maybe he'd even be excited to be a dad. Sure, we were young, but we could make it work. Well, he had just about the exact opposite reaction. He said I needed to take care of it right away. Those were his exact words. And there would be no discussion about it. I was furious. I don't think I've ever raised my voice in public, and I've certainly never had the manager called on me. Well, both happened then. The fight spilled out into the car, and continued all the way back to my house. We basically left it on a question mark. But he said he wants no part of this child's life under any circumstances. So, feeling helpless and alone, I felt I had no choice but to go inside and tell my parents about everything that was going on. One thing you need to know about my parents is, they are very religious. But they aren't, like, crazy about it. They understand that people are human beings. At least, I thought they did. When I came inside, my mom was sitting at the kitchen table on her laptop. She said my dad was somewhere in the basement working and didn't want to be disturbed. Well, that was about to be unavoidable. It was the most difficult thing I've ever had to say. When she saw that I was having trouble, she gave me the whole you can tell me anything, honey routine, and I was fooled into actually being reassured she wouldn't freak out about what she was about to hear. Finally, I was somehow able to mutter those two terrifying words, impregnant, and they landed in the room with a dull thud. She was totally silent for a long time. She just stared at me slack-jawed, as if I'd just told her I'd been accepted onto the Olympic curling team. And then she asked me a question that made my stomach drop. It's a question I'll never forget for the rest of my life. My mother asked me if I knew who the father was. I told her of course I did, that it was Mark, my boyfriend of a year. And my only boyfriend of that time. Didn't she know me at all? It seemed that bit of information made this bit of news go from bad to worse. I always thought my parents liked Mark, but I guess they saw him for what he was long before I did. She decided that all of this information combined was enough for her to disturb my dad. When she got up from the table to go downstairs and tell him, I felt like I was 5 years old again, getting in trouble for hitting my sister. Why does it have to be like this? Why is literally no one here for me? If my mom's reaction was to explode, my dad's was to implode. He got really quiet, and just kept repeating that it was too bad I didn't use any protection. Yeah, Dad, thanks a lot for the support. And my birth control is none of your business. It's just so disappointing. I was terrified to tell them, and here I was hoping they'd make me feel silly for feeling so. Boy, was I wrong. Instead I wish I'd just run away from home. Actually, there was a better option, and I decided to immediately pack a bag and take it. I called my Aunt Rita upstate and asked her if she minded a little bit of company. Aunt Rita is my mom's sister, but they don't really speak. It's something about some years-old feud that neither can seem to remember the origins of. All they know is that they are mad at each other and refuse to talk or be at any of the same family functions. But thankfully Rita has always been cool with us kids, me especially. Her and I have always had a close relationship, and I think it's secretly made my mom a little bit jealous over the years. I can't help it if Aunt Rita has better taste in music, movies, food and just about everything else than my mom any more than she can. I love my mom, but she puts the B in basic. With Aunt Rita, every day is an adventure. That's why I love the fact that I have an open invitation to come stay with her pretty much any time that I want. I figured this would be as good a time as any to cash in on that offer. Aunt Rita retired about 3 years ago, so now she spends most of her time taking care of her nice little property or hiking. She also enjoys mushroom hunting and tried to take me out there once, but I didn't have the patience. Plus, I hate mushrooms. She loves working on her old pickup truck, and can often be seen around the little town hauling large amounts of manure for her garden. Before Mom and her had their last big fight, my sisters and I spent a few summers up there as kids. They were by far the happiest of my childhood. I didn't tell Mom and Dad where I was going. After everything else I just told them. Mom hearing that I was going to Rita's would just make things worse. I told them I was going to my friend Janie's instead, and made sure to text Janie later and tell her just in case my mom called. Mom would have freaked if she knew I was driving 4 hours in the dark upstate in the condition I was in. But she drove me to do it, her and Dad's horrible reaction to me reaching out in my time of need. One thing was certain, I would never, ever do that to my child. But when that thought went through my brain, that's when it really hit me for the first time, that I was going to be a mom. I could fix all of the mistakes that my mom made with me, and make plenty of my own. I suddenly began to cry, right there in the car, driving down the freeway. They were red, hot, fiery tears of fear and rage. I had no idea where I was going, besides Aunt Rita's house. And I hoped she'd have at least a few answers for me. Well, of course she would. And she'd have a few answers to questions that I didn't even have, about my mom and dad, and the truth about my birth. I drove up the long gravel drive that leads to her rustic little cabin and found her waiting for me on the porch with a pitcher of iced tea. She always had the best iced in the world. Of course, she could tell that something was seriously wrong as soon as she saw my hangdog expression coming up the stairs. And to my surprise, she immediately asked me if I was pregnant. It was actually more of a statement, really. Aunt Rita always did have a bit of a sixth sense about her. Or maybe I was already showing it in my cheeks. She never had any kids of her own. I always heard that she'd had a girlfriend way back in the day, but my mom was always a little cagey on the details. That kind of thing was frowned upon in that family. We talked long into the night. I told her the whole story about the pregnancy, about Travis leaving me, and my parents abandoning me. She said with a sign that she wasn't surprised. People can't seem to handle real life hitting them in the face anymore. We're all too preoccupied with ourselves and lost in our screens. There was a notably small amount of those in Rita's house. She has an old tube TV that only got the local stations, which she mainly uses to keep an eye on the local news and her one guilty pleasure soap opera. She's been using a typewriter to write her memoirs, and only has the landline phone. It was probably about 2 a.m. when she finally told me the story that changed my entire perspective on my parents, and on my entire life, for good. I could tell that she was a bit apprehensive to tell it at first. Even after all of the struggles my mom and Aunt Rita had, it seemed like she was still having trouble breaking some long-promised secret. Finally she came out with it. It was a story that had my head absolutely spinning. My parents were young when they had me. My age, actually. I probably should have mentioned that. But like I told you, they were very religious and got married young. Or so I thought. It turns out, my parents were exactly married when my mom got pregnant with me. In fact, her and my dad weren't even planning to get married until she found out about it. She came to Rita and told her, practically having a nervous breakdown over the whole thing. I guess she had told my dad and he didn't take it very well. Sound familiar? So Rita and my mom went to their parents, who then went to my dad's parents, and pretty much arranged a marriage. Totally unbelievable. I mean, I think my parents love each other. They don't act like they're stuck together. But who knows? Apparently they've been fooling me for this long. But what really got me was something else that my mom told Rita at the same time. And apparently this was the big secret, the one that she vowed to go to her grave with. My mom told her that she couldn't be 100% sure that my dad was the father. So, now it all makes sense. That's why my mom asked me if I knew who the father was. Because she was projecting her own issues onto me. But I still didn't understand. Wouldn't going through essentially the exact same thing at my age inspire sympathy, not scorn? Well, Aunt Rita had an answer for that as well. It was simple. They still hated themselves for the supposed sin of their youths. She said that I had to understand that my grandparents were far more strict than my parents ever were. Sure, somehow Rita eventually broke free of that rigid thinking, but my parents' made sure that they knew they should be ashamed of what they'd done. So now they are doing me the favor of passing it on down to me. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Rita saw how angry I got and decided she needed to defend my mom a little. She said that she doesn't choose to be this way, and that she had a lot more sympathy for her than she used to, and that I will too someday. I said that may be true, but it's not someday, it's today, and in just a few months I'm going to be the size of a whale and in need of a whole lot of help. It was then that I got an offer that I could hardly refuse. Aunt Rita offered me her spare bedroom. Honestly, my first instinct was how my mom would feel about it. Like I said, she's been jealous of our relationship my whole life. But then again, where else was I going to go? By the time morning came, I agreed to stay. So now I'm here. But I can't just stay forever. I have to go home and get my things, arrange for online classes, and find a doctor. Oh yeah, I have to tell my parents at some point. And I suppose the responsible thing to do would be to Mark as well. He is the father of the baby after all. I wonder if it's going to be a boy or a girl. Gosh, I'm wondering so many things right now. I guess I'll go back tonight and talk to my parents. Maybe spend the night and come back in the morning. I've never been more scared in my life, but somehow staying at Aunt Rita's, I know it's going to be okay. Update 1. Hey everybody. So I got home early yesterday evening only to find that my parents weren't home. And then my eyes glanced across the calendar on the kitchen wall and I realized that it was Wednesday night and they're at church. I went to my room and meticulously packed, listening intently for the garage door to open. It's funny what you realize about yourself when you're packing a bag, like about how such little you really need to survive. Finally, about 10 to 8, I heard the scratchy metal doors creak open as they pulled their silver Volvo into the open space. I started to go down the stairs to greet them, to find them clutching their Bibles solemn and serious. Instead, they were laughing and carrying a leftover bag and less than half a bottle of take-home wine. I called out their names, the actual real first names. Not Mom and Dad. And it sobered them up quicker than red and blue lights at an OV checkpoint. Until they could make it my features in the dark, they must have thought a very personally informed burglar had entered the home. I asked them if they were handing out full bottles of wine during communion at church now, which I thought was funnier than they did, apparently. Instead, my mom asked, all offended that I was in my own home without her knowledge, and Dad just stood there like a lump. That's what he usually does. Mr. Non-confrontational. Well, there was something he was about to be confronted with, whether he liked it or not. I sat them both down at the kitchen table and told them that I needed to talk to them about something. At first I thought I should take a gentle approach, take it easy on them, but finally I decided to just go for it. I'd tell them the pure, unvarnished truth. I'd give them the luxury they refused me all these years. I told them that I'd just come from Aunt Rita's, and then I straight up told them that I'd be moving in with her until at least the birth. That's when my mom asked me a question that really surprised me. Maybe even more than the one about if I know who the father is. She asked me if I was sure I wanted to keep it. I couldn't believe my ultra-religious mother had just asked me that. It was then that I decided to tell her what Rita told me. I wanted to know what they would say about her claim that she got pregnant with me out of wedlock. I of course believed my Aunt Rita, but I figured seeing my parents' reaction to me knowing would tell me just as much. Well, it told me everything I needed to know. They denied it completely. Basically everything Rita told me about my real origin story, my parents said was a lie. But of course, I didn't believe them. And even if somehow they were telling the truth, they'd already rejected me. Rita was the one who would truly accept me no matter what. Not my parents. And definitely not Mark. So, I told them that if I made my choice, I'd be going back up north to Aunt Rita's in the morning and staying. My mom was furious, depressed, and every emotion in between. I heard her crying in her room all night. But what could I do about it now? She'd made her bed, and I'd made my decision. I honestly don't know what the future holds, but I know that with Aunt Rita by my side, I'll always have someone on my team. And I really do want to reconcile with my parents someday. After all, they're going to be grandparents in less than 9 months. But I'm going to be a mom, and that means I have to look out for someone else from now on.